Hello, and welcome to Understanding and Overcoming Imposter Syndrome. I'm Yasmina Headley, a rapid transformational therapy practitioner and a transformational coach. I specialize in confidence, self belief, self worth, and imposter syndrome. I'm really excited to bring you this content, so give me a moment to just share my slides and we will dive straight in. So, I'll be covering what imposter syndrome is, the impact it has, strategies you can use to manage and overcome it, and finally, how you can contribute to a positive culture that minimizes the likelihood of people experiencing imposter syndrome. So, a bit about me. When I was 16, my life looked like a mess from the outside looking in. I'd left school with no qualifications, I had a chronic health condition, and I had lots of family stuff going on. But on the inside, I had this incredible sense of self belief. I was fearless and I thought I could do anything I put my mind to. And that really served me well. I got my degree, I got my master's, and in my 20s, I was leading teams, managing departments. I had a multi-million pound budget. And it was then that imposter syndrome hit me. So, what is imposter syndrome? There are so many different definitions, and the reality is it affects different people in different ways. But typically, imposter syndrome involves a deep sense of self doubt and feelings of inadequacy. Not feeling good enough, second guessing yourself, questioning everything you do, a sense of being undeserving, believing your success is down to luck. How many times have you heard someone say, or especially famous people and celebrities, I was in the right place at the right time? I mean, it doesn't matter where you are if you're not bringing anything to the table, but so often people believe their success is just down to luck. Fearing being exposed as a fraud is a massive one. It's where the name comes from. And this was big for me. I went from managing a five-figure budget to managing multi millions of pounds. And I was so scared of being found out to be a fraud and fired, even though I was completely open and transparent about my experience, even though I was performing really, really well. I still had these fears in my mind. Undervaluing your natural gifts and talents. We generally appreciate the things we work hard for more than the things that come easily to us. So, if you've invested a lot of time, money, effort into a qualification or a particular accomplishment, you will probably appreciate that a lot more than your communication skills if your communication skills have come very easily to you. And this can be a problem with imposter syndrome because people think, I'm not doing anything, I'm just being me. Well, actually, all of those natural skills, natural strengths, things that just come so easily to you should be valued and should be celebrated. And last but not least, imposter syndrome is incredibly common, and I'll be coming back to that point. So, I wanted to demonstrate the difference between perception and reality. Like I said, in my case, I had all this great feedback about how I was doing. I did a great job on the finances, yet I was still feeling undeserving of my position, feeling that I'd be exposed as a fraud. And imposter syndrome really can warp an individual's experience. So, on the left, we have the perception of someone with imposter syndrome. They believe that other people know so much more than they know, and they really shrink and minimize themselves. Whereas the reality is, you know what you know, other people know what they know. Of course, some people are more experienced, but you know what you need to know within your area, and you can grow, you can develop, you can add to that. So it's really important to note this, that if you are feeling this sense of self doubt, being undeserving, that it doesn't necessarily reflect the reality. So, what is the impact of imposter syndrome? First, I wanted to talk about who it affects. It is incredibly common, and studies suggest that 70% of people will experience imposter syndrome at some point in their lifetime. I suspect it might be higher than that. Women experience it a lot, and the initial studies around imposter syndrome were completely based on women. However, I want to also share that men do suffer it as well. It's less researched. Belonging to a minority group greatly increases the likelihood that someone will experience imposter syndrome. And this is any type of minority group. So, people with disabilities, whether it's on the grounds of race, religion, sexuality, gender identity, all of these things can impact on someone's experience. I want to draw particular attention to women of color and Black women in particular because they are even more likely than everyone else to experience imposter syndrome. And that's not to say that all women of color and all Black women do, but because of different factors, including structural racism, it's much more prevalent in these groups. And then, last but not least, being underrepresented within a particular space can also increase the likelihood of someone experiencing imposter syndrome. So, for example, if you have someone from a very poor background in a room with people from very wealthy backgrounds, they will be more likely to experience imposter syndrome. So now I want to share with you my circle of imposter syndrome. And this is really to demonstrate the wide reaching effects it can have. So this isn't a kind of journey that people follow through imposter syndrome. It looks different to everyone. And this is actually quite an extreme example, but it's just to show you how wide reaching the impact can be. So, someone can start with feelings of self doubt, inadequacy, and to address that, they begin overworking. And overworking is all about really, proving to everyone that they belong there, that they can do the job, proving to themselves, and really going above and beyond when sometimes it isn't even needed. So now they've set this really high standard, there's pressure to maintain it, and they start to get stressed. This stress starts to affect them outside of work. They're being short with their children, snapping at their partner. There's no time to have a social life because they're so busy working. And so work has gone from affecting them just while they're at work to affecting them outside as well. Over time, performance can start to suffer because you can only maintain these high standards for so long, and stress is going to get the better of you at some point. And then progression is affected. If you are struggling to perform in your current role, it's going to be very hard to negotiate a salary increase, to get a promotion. And over time, your self worth is going to take a hit. And so you might not even think you are worthy of applying for a job externally. And then in the long run, what can happen is burnout, total burnout, can't get out of bed, can't work, you're now not being paid, your relationships are suffering even more, and you're experiencing mental, emotional, and physical effects. Again, this is not a kind of journey, a linear journey that people take. In fact, some people can experience self doubt, and that then affects their performance immediately. And they skip all these other points, it just affects their performance immediately. So it's important to understand these different impacts, both within yourself and within others. So I'll let you look at this in your own time. It's a word cloud. You can just pause the video at this point and see some of the different impacts that imposter syndrome can have. I just wanted you to have a sense of how far and wide reaching the effects can be. So, my favorite part, strategies for managing imposter syndrome. So, the first strategy is normalizing it. One of the problems with imposter syndrome is that it can really give you this sense of being isolated in some way. I mean, no one wants to go to their boss and say, "Hi, boss, just to let you know, I feel like I'm doing a really bad job." No one wants to say that. So, what happens is people internalize those feelings and they grow over time and result in the different impacts we've just looked at. But I encourage you, if you are having these feelings, talk about it. That doesn't need to be with your boss, it could be with a friend, with a trusted colleague. but talk about it. And what you'll probably find is that the people you share it with are also having the same experiences. Remember, 70% of people go through this. You are absolutely not alone. And then you need to look at what is facts and what is feelings. What is the reality versus what is your perception? And there are a few ways to do this. So I've included a timeline exercise, and this is really about looking at your life and looking at what you have achieved so far. Really picking out those accomplishments objectively. It's not about comparing yourself to anyone else. It's about really looking objectively at what you have achieved and why you are where you are, and taking some time to celebrate those things, really feel into them. And then tracking achievements. I encourage everyone to do this. One of my big frustrations as a people manager was that I'd have appraisals with people, an annual appraisal, and they talk about a few things they'd done. And I just think you've done more than this in the last month, let alone the last year. But the reality is sometimes we don't see things as a big deal once they're over. We forget about all the work that went into it, and we just move on to the next thing. So I really encourage you to start tracking your achievements as you go along. And you can do that in different ways. You can use a spreadsheet if that works for you, a good old pen and paper. You can even use the notes on your phone. And tracking achievements is important because it's part of progression. It's part of being able to refer to when you have job interviews or promotion opportunities, but it's also about giving yourself a boost. And other things you can do include having an email folder where you drop all your nice emails into so you can refer back to them when you need a boost, and even having a jar. Get a clear jar, an empty jar, and just write down your achievements as they happen on bits of paper, fold them up, put them in the jar, and when you need a boost, you can just open the jar and look through all your amazing achievements. Self talk is a big part of overcoming imposter syndrome. I'm not going to talk too much about this because it's covered in another module, but what I will say is that everything starts as a thought. Everything. Whether we're talking about the light bulb, your carpet, your computer, everything starts as a thought. Your thoughts create your feelings, and then your feelings create your actions. So if you're feeling inadequate, if you're doubting yourself, a lot of this will go back to your thoughts. In fact, all of it will. So tune into what you're thinking. And if you're thinking you're not good enough, replace that with more positive thoughts, because you are good enough, you are worthy, you are deserving, and you deserve to be happy and successful, whatever that means to you. And then the next strategy is around personal and professional development. And this really comes from the facts versus feelings. So if you are feeling that there is an issue in a particular area, do something about it. You know, there's no point beating yourself up. You could do a course, you can have some mentoring, you could potentially do some shadowing. There are lots of ways to deal with that. But if there is genuinely an area of concern, perhaps an area you're underperforming or you just want to be better in, absolutely ask for help, do something to develop in that area. There's no need to, again, there's no need to beat yourself up. Work on it, see it as an opportunity to grow and learn. And last but not least, if these feelings of inadequacy, not being worthy, or anything else are really getting you down, you may need to seek professional support. And this is really key to not get to that stage of burnout. If you've tried all of these other strategies, if you're just becoming really overwhelmed with how you feel, please, please, please seek professional support and don't feel that you have to deal with it all on your own. So, minimizing imposter syndrome by creating a positive culture. I wanted to share some of the triggers for imposter syndrome. And again, this will depend on the person. A lack of belonging is huge. And this goes into what I said before about how minority groups are more affected. So be aware of the culture you are creating and how you can cultivate this sense of belonging for everyone. A promotion, this is what happened to me. I got a big promotion, and that's where my imposter syndrome kicked in. Having had a bad work or life experience, so that could be racism, bullying, bad management, all of these things can not only affect your current experience, but they can also affect your future experiences if you don't deal with them. And some of these things are harder to deal with. Childhood factors, perhaps you were criticized a lot by one of your parents or a teacher. Conversely, I've had clients who have been the favorite child, but they've grown up with this sense of enjoying it, but also knowing it wasn't deserved. And then that translates into imposter syndrome when they grow up. There are so many different childhood factors that can be a trigger for imposter syndrome, and they can show up later on in life. And then finally, just the normal ups and downs of life. If life is kicking you around, that can definitely give you this sense of self doubt and inadequacy that can extend to all areas, including work and your career. So, some of the things you can do, so, positive feedback is so important. And sometimes we look at people who are soaring, who are doing a great job, and we think they know they're great. They don't need our feedback because they know they're doing a great job. But the reality is, even if you know you're doing a great job, it's still nice to hear it. And you really don't know how anyone thinks or feels. So, it's so important to give that positive feedback. And when you need to give criticism, keep it constructive. Focus on what you want to change and how the person can change and offer your support, but keep it constructive so that it isn't just negative criticism for the sake of it. The point of giving constructive criticism is to help someone grow and develop. Create a culture of self celebration. Now, depending on where you are in the world, this may be more challenging. I'm in the UK and we are not known for talking about ourselves and our achievements. We value, I say we, not me personally, but generally, being humble is valued. And that's the case in a lot of cultures. But inviting people to celebrate their achievements, inviting people to kind of talk about themselves in a positive way can be extremely valuable. And it creates a culture where sharing, where celebration, where bringing your best self to work is valued. Understanding the impact in different areas, such as recruitment, and taking measures to reduce it. So, studies show that men will apply for a job when they have as little as 30% of the requirements. Women will generally apply for a job when they have between 70 to 100%. So, rather than kind of expecting women to apply earlier and men to apply later, adopt an attitude where you encourage people to apply sooner. If you are responsible for recruitment practices, look at those practices. How can you advocate for people? How can you get women, underrepresented groups, people in minority groups to apply earlier? It's about being proactive and not just placing the responsibility on the individual. What are you doing as a leader, as an organization, to encourage people who may be at more of a disadvantage in this sense? And then understanding the different types of imposter. So I've got a sheet which you will have as part of this module, and that talks about the different ways imposter syndrome shows up. And it can help you to recognize it within yourself and also within the people you work with. So, I wanted to finish on a few reminders. So, remember, if you experience self doubt, feelings of inadequacy, fear of being exposed as a fraud, you are completely normal. These feelings are not a reflection of the reality, it's simply something that lots of us experience. You are not alone, you are normal. Remember, there is a difference between the perception and the reality. Go back, dig out those facts, and make some effort to kind of distinguish between what is fact and what is just a feeling and that horrible negative voice that we all have in our heads from time to time. Know that imposter syndrome can absolutely be overcome. It can, it will. And finally, you deserve success and you deserve to enjoy your success. Thank you.